Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Lab. I'm joined today by Jesse McCullough, a pharmacist and leadership expert with a passion for helping pharmacists improve their leadership skills. My name is Dena Phillips, and we are happy to have you along today. Jess, it's been a minute since we've recorded. It's good to be back together for more leadership learning. So,
You- you-
how has
you-
it been going?
I tell you what, it has been going, and I don't know how easy it has been for you, Dina, to create a good habit. But I know for me, it's much easier to create a bad habit than a good habit. And we had a really good routine going, and then things sort of threw us off. Sean is again on assignment. No telling what beach he's finding himself on today. But I'm thankful that you and I can get back together again and talk about these important things, right? We want to talk about leading people well, and I'm so excited for the conversation we're going to have today.
Yeah, tough gig Sean's got. Somebody's got to do it, I guess. So we'll
Yeah, that's true. That is so
we'll
true.
see how he's going. So, well, what do you have in store for us today?
Well, this is just building off some of the conversations that we've been having just in previous recordings, and it's about being able to move into something maybe before you feel qualified. And I don't know if that resonates with you or not, but I think we probably can identify that there's some new opportunity that we can move into, and leadership is just full of this, is it not? That there's something new
Yes.
that you need to go into, and oftentimes you don't feel quite prepared. You don't feel ready for it. And I guess I would give you this. Uh, and it's a very simple definition, and it's probably a very obvious definition. And so I'll just ask for people's forgiveness is if this is stating the obvious. But when we talk about doing something new, this is just simply something that you haven't done before, right? And when you haven't done something before, there is some level of uncertainty with it, right? I can tell you just from a personal example. Here a couple of weeks ago, my son says, "Hey, I need to take this road trip," and I was a little. He's just not one for doing stuff like that. This was new, and as such, I became a little uncomfortable with him saying, "I'm going to go drive 6 hours in a day," right? When he's very rarely taken long trips longer than an hour, right? So it was new. It's not that other people haven't done it before, but it's new to this environment, and we need to be able to work through that. So, Dean, have you ever felt yourself in a situation like that where you're being asked to do something new?
Yeah, a little bit. As I shared on LinkedIn, I was recently promoted to the system director of pharmacy services for my organization, which I am super pumped about when everybody at work's kind of asking, "Oh, congratulations, what do you think? How are you doing it?" And my big thing is just, my go-to answer has been I am equal parts excited and terrified. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of been my go-to answer. But this was kind of a long process of, hearing that my boss is retiring.
Mm-hmm.
And will be out in a couple of weeks. Will be her last day. So she was retiring, and this, kind of all happened pretty suddenly, or at least quicker than anybody might have been expecting. And it was this thing of like, okay, that there's an opportunity maybe, somebody's going to need to fill that
Mm-hmm.
role. And I have absolutely no business applying for this job. So that's kind of where I started,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of walking through that process. And I'd be lying if I said the thought of maybe applying for her job in a few years or 5 years, when we kind of thought her roadmap might be a little different, was good. But now the option for like a gentle transition, or even a gentle being able to wrap your head around the idea, was gone. It's like it's a
Mm-hmm.
do or die now. The job's going to be posted here shortly. Are you applying or not? And so I started at, I have no business applying for this job. And I had talked to, a couple of mentors, and you kind of
Mm-hmm.
privately behind the scenes, and just kind of getting some advice on where do we go and what do we do from here. Um, at the end of the day, it sort of seemed like, why not? So let's apply, make them tell you no, and, just kind of
Yeah.
make yourself an attractive candidate. So that was the first moment where I'm like, I don't feel like I'm ready for this. This is not something I feel qualified to do. And it was really the first time in my pharmacy career and journey that I felt as though my clinical skills were not my biggest asset, kind of
Mm.
moving into a role like this one. This was all about pharmacy services, operation, visionary type stuff, and what's the next big thing? Where do we go from here? And I was like, I can take care of patients, pretty
Hmm.
well. And so that was kind of my perception, that I had not, did not have the skills or the qualifications to apply. But I did. And I got an interview and I did that. I didn't feel qualified for that either. And, all the things. And then they called me back a day or so after the interview and was like, we'd like to offer you the position. And I was like, really?
Did you dial the right number?
Yeah, are you sure? Did you mean to call me? But there was just so much self-doubt and
Hmm.
imposter syndrome and everything going on. I could think of, I'm sizing up the competition. We had lots of internal candidates for my role, and we were like, well, I know so and so applied, and oh, she's better at this than me, and he's better at that than me, and just all the things kind of sitting in there, and just feeling very uncomfortable, very pushed out of
Yeah.
my comfort zone. But at the end of the day, you never know. And so I was
Yeah,
very excited.
I hope our conversation today can bring some comfort for you and for anybody else that may find themselves in a situation like that, because this was very much, as memory serves, one of the first conversations that you and I had many,
I
many
think
months
so.
ago, even
Mm-hmm.
before the idea of doing a podcast like this
Mm-hmm.
crossed our minds. And I could tell early on that you have one of the most important pieces necessary to be a good leader. And it's very simply this: it's that you care about people, right? If you have a leader that does not care about people, uh, it's not a good situation, right? But I could tell very, very quickly, and just as you've described here, I hope that our viewers and listeners can very much tell through the language that you use in describing, what you're going through, is that you put yourself out there. You said, this is a little bit uncomfortable, but you're doing that because you care about people. You care about the people that you work with. You care about the people that they serve. You care about the organization and those different things. And not everybody has that. Not everybody has that. I know that I stepped into some uncomfortable situations early in my career. I did not have the same interview. I did not have the same attitude going into that. I had some very selfish motives early in my career, largely around schedule, right? Largely around schedule. And that came back to humble me quickly and often as we go through as we go through our career. And so, I just want to, one, compliment you and congratulate you on
Thank
this
you.
opportunity that has come your way. I know that just uh, based on your humbleness of spirit and the posture that you bring to the table, that you will do quite well in this new role. You will serve those people well, and you will make life better for so many people. And I can't wait for you. And now I hope this doesn't mean that we podcast less frequently. It may actually mean that we get more topics, right? You may say, "Hey, Jess, we got a good one. We got to talk with. We got to bring Sean back in
Right.
from his assignments. We need his input on these as well, right?
Yes.
So I think this is going to be so good. But I think with our conversation today, perhaps we should. Perhaps we should just take a note to recognize how often you have stepped into uncertainty throughout life. right? And this isn't just you, Dina. This is
Mhm.
me. This is everybody, right?
Mhm.
We have stepped into uncertainty so many times in our lives. Yet as we get into adulthood, it's probably much more common when you're younger. But as we get into adulthood, we find ourselves where we get sort of stuck into these routines and we become perhaps a little comfortable, perhaps a little too comfortable. We may become complacent. There's different things that sort of get us to the point where we we don't take those risks or those perceived risks quite as frequently as we used to. Um, I would ask all of our listeners to at least be open to the idea of how you stepped into something new pretty much every day when you went through your formal education. And whenever I say formal education, I will take that back to kindergarten, if not before, right? Some of you may have gone to preschool and done some things like that, but you were always finding yourself in these situations where you were being exposed to new ideas, right? It may have been learning numbers or learning colors or learning to tie your shoe or whatever. And, some of those things may have been a little bit daunting early in life, but the fact of the matter was, is you kept after them and you advanced through them. As we were, sharing some notes before we actually sat down to record today, I was talking about how we it can become very easy for us to become concerned that we would go to use mathematics as an example, that we would go from adding and subtracting and just jump a couple light years ahead to advanced calculus, right? And maybe you'll have a scenario like that. I hope you don't, but maybe you will. You may find yourself in deep water very, very quickly. But oftentimes, what happens is you have these different steps, right? You learn your numbers, then you learn addition, then you learn subtraction, and then you start learning how to carry and borrow and all those different things before you even venture into multiplying and dividing and fractions and percentages and probabilities and all those different things that you learn as you go through. And I'm more of a numbers guy. Dean, I know you for sure are more musically inclined than what I am. But like if for anybody that's ever learned to play an instrument, you don't pick up the instrument and you're not ready for Broadway. There's a process that happens to get you to that point.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and the voice being my favorite instrument,
Mhm.
and that's kind of where I have gone to, and I've had lots of professional voice training and things like that as a singer and as a voiceover artist and voice actor as well. And yeah, and it's interesting the process too. Like the first thing you do is you got to go, man, I don't want to go take a voice lesson. That's embarrassing. Like no one wants to hear me sing. And when I first started taking lessons, that was another push, like,
Mhm.
okay, well, it is what it is today. Do you want it to get better or not? And so you kind of had to it takes a lot of humility to learn something new. In whatever setting you're doing, it takes some admission that you need some help and you're not where you want to be and you can't get there on your own. And there's a lot of humility that's involved in that, which I think is a very good thing. I love that about how life works like that. But yeah, you start out and you learn these few things and then you master those and you learn something else and you master that. And by the time you get to the end, you can like, pick up a thing and go, okay, this is what's wrong with my voice today. It's not this, it's not that. And you're running through ideas that just kind of make you the expert on your own instrument. That people in a different position, they don't even realize that's something they need to know.
Mhm.
And people are singing at different levels and you're like, okay, well, I've got, I can do pitch now, but what about placement and how do I stretch this? And it goes from moving to like something very rigid, like learning technically how to sing, to over here going, realizing that this whole thing has just been a means to an end, which is really where your expressiveness comes in. And you just, the more tools you get and the more technique you learn, it just adds more colors to your palette so that you can paint a different picture. And, you might have a crayon drawing over here, and over here is like a, Michelangelo painting the
Mhm.
Sistine Chapel. And the same thing happens with, the voice and stuff like that. And so I just find that a very incredible process. It's really, you can never be comfortable when you're learning something new. It's always hard. It's very uncomfortable. And you never get better. When I first had when I was with my band and we had our first gig, I was terrified. I was like, this is not like, what am I doing? I'm not a good enough singer to be out here in front of people that have paid to come see me sing and hear me sing and that kind of thing. And then, 5 years later, it's old hat, and you're like, okay, I got this, and it's a much better show. And but that process is very scary, and no one ever feels qualified to do the thing. Um,
Yes, especially up front. And I want to thank you for sharing that, Dina, because that was a much better illustration than my mathematics, right? It's because it's complex, right? It is so beautifully complex, right? And there are so many people out there today who find themselves with some level of dissatisfaction with the situation that they find themselves in. They want things to get better, but the fact of the matter is, for things to get better, they're going to have to become uncomfortable. They're going to have to do something differently, right? Now my background is community pharmacy, and I know so many people who love being pharmacists in the community. They love that setting.
mhm.
Would they like to do more? Yeah, I mean, they're not really anchored to many of the technical aspects. I don't know that there's many of them that rejoice with dealing with insurance issues. Like, and I'm sure there's some people who
Fair.
that love to solve them. But there's other people that get really frustrated with that. But that's just an invitation to how do you lead and how do you navigate through scenarios like that. Um, and that's something that we need to recognize. Um, Change is necessary for where we are. If we were to have a crystal ball and we were to look 5 years ahead or 10 years ahead or even 5 months ahead, and if you were to say, well, things are going to be exactly the same at this future point as they are today, would you find that necessarily encouraging? I know you're
Right.
going through a transition now. You're moving into a new role, and there is some level of discomfort with that. Now, that discomfort tells you that you're presented with the opportunity to grow. But I'll make the suggestion that if you're dealing with that same discomfort 5 months from now, you probably won't be happy. And the
Mhm.
chances are the people around you won't be happy either,
Right.
right? So like there's the invitation to change and to grow and to improve and to build something new. Um, I came across this and I've shared this before on LinkedIn. Um, I find this to be so insightful. I have this theory that people love change, but they really love change for other people. Like, I want things to be better. I have certain things in my life, be it at work, be it at home. It's here. I want it to be here, right? But it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do. And if somebody else were to say, "Hey, I want my life to go from here to here," I'm all for that. When you called me and you said, "Hey, Jess, I'm thinking about this new job. I want to go from here to here." I'm for that. Why? Why? Like, what type of people would be against that? Would be against you finding yourself in a better situation? right?
Mhm.
I'm for every one of our viewers and listeners finding themselves in a better situation, 3 months, 6 months, 3 years from now. That's what I want for all of them. The thing is that it's not easy. And oftentimes we look around us and we say, it'd be so much better if like everything around us just changed and we didn't have to. But that's sort of backwards. That's not really the way that things work. So I came across this. It's known as the story of the unknown monk, and I have it on my other screen here. So I'm gonna read it. It goes like this. Um, when I was a young man, I wanted to change the world. And I'm just going to hit pause there. And I mean, does that resound with any of us? Does that resonate with you? Like at some point, you looked around and you say, "Hey, I want the world to change. I want the world to be better." You see whatever challenges or injustices or whatever. But the unknown monk says, when I was a young man, I wanted to change the world. I found it was difficult to change the world. So I tried to change my nation. Couldn't do the big things, so I moved it down. I tried to change my nation. He goes on to say, when I found I couldn't change the nation, I began to focus on my town. I couldn't change the town. And as an older man, I tried to change my family. Now, as an old man, I realize the only thing I can change is myself. And suddenly I realized that if long ago I had changed myself, I could have made an impact on my family. My family and I could have made an impact on our town. Their impact could have changed the nation, and I could have indeed changed the world. And this is known as the story of the unknown monk. Now, just my research has suggested that this story was found on a tombstone somewhere in Europe and dates back to the Middle Ages. I have not been able to confirm that story, and I have since also found a reference that this is a story that randomly appeared on the internet in the early 2000s. I don't know what the truth is on that just yet, but I do know that that story contains an awful lot of truth.
Mhm.
Like, how many of us want things to be better? But the reality is that things are going to get better when we get better. Things are going to get better for you when you get better. Things are going to get better for me when I get better. Things are going to get better for each one of our listeners when they get better. And I hope that doesn't sound as scary. I hope that actually sounds encouraging. I hope that sounds, I hope that sounds optimistic, because you have complete control over that, right? You have complete control over that. Now, the thing is are you doing anything about it? I met with somebody yesterday and he was telling me how frustrated he was. He's been doing this work for 30 or 40 years. I think he actually was going so far as to say 40 years. He's like, it's so frustrating. And I said, well, what are you doing to get better? Well, he's not doing anything to get better. So should
Right.
anybody be surprised? He's not willing to be uncomfortable. He's not willing to step into something new. And as such, he'll find himself stuck in a place that he doesn't like to be. And
Mhm.
one of my mentors just uses this very short phrase. He says, stuck stinks. And that's true. There's a there's a quote that's attributed to Zig Ziglar. It says, "You don't have to be great to start." And isn't that encouraging, right? You don't have to be great to start, but you do have to start to be great. And Dina, I want to recognize you that as you step into this new role, I hope you find encouragement with that. You don't have to be great as you move into this role, but you do have to move into this role to be great at it. And I
Yes.
hope you find some encouragement there.
It is very encouraging. The other thing that I take away from this lesson is that this is the story for everyone.
Hmm.
Like, no one gets born the expert. No one knows how to do it. Everyone that has ever done anything worth doing had to start from the beginning. And I find that very encouraging because it's so easy in this, social media overload of everybody's highlight reel to be able to come into the story once they've achieved something, or once they're
Mhm.
good at whatever it is, whatever the thing is they're trying to do. And basically starting a new jobs, kind of feeling like you're starting at ground zero. But I have much more encouragement now, going, that's where everybody starts. Like
Mhm.
that's the expectation. The expectation is not that you come in being the expert and knowing everything about it. It's like, no, that's the point, is that you get to start over at zero. And that's
Exactly.
very encouraging to me.
Yep. Yeah, there's a quote that's attributed to Thomas Jefferson. I like the intent. I tried to make it my own, but the Thomas Jefferson quote says, if you want something you never had, you have to be willing to do something you've never done."
Yeah, I
And
like that.
I like just that flavor. I've tried to make that my own, and I say that, to get somewhere you've never been, you'll have to go some ways you've never gone. Right. And
Yeah.
as I was thinking about that and preparing, I thought, I should have found some obscure diner in some forsaken place. And maybe some of our listeners can make a suggestion on where that is. But, a place that you and I haven't been to before, Dina. Now, if we're going to get there, we're going to have to do some things we haven't done before. We're going to have to travel some roads we haven't gone down before. We're going to have to make some turns. We may have to make some detours. There's going to be some different things. But the things that we want in life, be it personal, be it professional, whatever it may be, it's going to require that we do some different things. And from that, I could point back to the lesson that we did on the law of cause and effect several weeks ago, right? If we want to get a different effect, we're going to have some different causes. We're going to have some different things to go on there.
Mhm.
So, I hope our listeners have found some value um, in this, in that, understand that as you lead people, it is going to be uncomfortable. You are going to be doing some things that you have never done. You'll probably find yourself dealing with some things you never imagined
I'm sure
you
that's
are going to deal
true.
with, right?
I
You're going to
am
find
sure
your,
that's true.
but for our listeners, before we hit the record button, I was sharing with Dina a story I had with a pharmacist who I would end up scheduling. I worked with this pharmacist as a grad intern, did not have a very good experience. And fast forward a couple of years, and now I'm working as a pharmacist scheduler. And pharmacist calls me and tells me that the evening had been the previous night had been spent in the emergency room due to a domestic altercation. I didn't, I wasn't expecting that at all, ever. Like, that was not what I was expecting to wake me up in the morning. I
Right.
can't, I'm not going to be coming to work today. This is what I have going on, right? But like these are things that are uncomfortable. But as we go through them, I realize now how that changed my perspective and my compassion towards this person,
Hmm.
um, with that time, from the first experience to that experience, I had an invitation to shift, and see that person in a different light. So, so anyway, what else do we need to talk about here today, Dean? Have we hit the right notes here today?
Yeah.
That's me trying to make a musical reference.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. Love the pun. Love it. Yeah, I think we're good. That's probably about anything else we dive into, I think would require more than a commute's worth of podcasts to
That's
get people
probably
where they're
true.
going. So that's probably a good place to end for today. But we appreciate you tuning in. Thank you to our listeners. We hope you found some value in it, as Jesse said. And I hope it encourages you to go ahead and apply for that position you don't feel qualified for, launch that passion project that you feel you know way too little about. That's how you learn. That's where you get where you want to go. So I would encourage you to do that. Step out of your comfort zone and head over to RPH Ally to join the waiting list for the Four Pillars of Leadership course. It's free, which is a great introductory price. And it's a great way to start strengthening your leadership muscles. So head over there and do that. You can also find Jesse and myself over on LinkedIn. We'd love to connect with you there, so stop by and say hello. In the meantime, keep leading your teams with confidence from the boardroom to the break room, and we will see you next time on the Leadership Lab.